Grievance be noted, and I call the member for Bean.
Deputy Speaker, I rise to speak about both a grievance and hope. A betrayal of many of the most vulnerable in our community through the Robodebt scandal and the erosion of trust in government over the last 9 years. But with hope in the commencement of the Robodebt Royal Commission today and the imminent introduction of Anti-Corruption Commission legislation tomorrow, despite some of the fears others in this chamber might have. The Robodebt debacle had a devastating impact across Australia. It had a devastating impact in Canberra, and I know that it had a detrimental impact on local families in my electorate of Bean. Over 400,000 people had unlawful debts raised against them by the previous government, marking a shameful chapter in the administration of our social security system and a massive failure of public administration. My electorate of Bean was no exception, with the scheme creating catastrophic stress and anxiety for many of my constituents. In one instance, a 28-year-old constituent with an intellectual disability was being chased for a debt all the way back to 2015 without any prior notice or review of her earnings by Centrelink. Our most vulnerable and often most ill-equipped to properly understand or challenge the basis of such debts were targeted. The previous government persistently denied that its pet scheme was illegal or that it was doing harm, dismissing it as a robo-scare. They argued that the harassment letters were all about integrity. It was just a simple request for information. After months of dragging victims of Robodebt through further stress and anxiety and hardship, the scheme was found to be illegal, with the government finally agreeing to zeroing the debts. My heart goes out to the families across the country who were devastated and damaged by this unfair process, and in some cases lost loved ones. According to data from the Department of Human Services covering the period from 2016 to 18, more than 2,030 people died after receiving a Centrelink debt notice, and of those, about 1/5 were aged under 35. Most people who died were still receiving Centrelink payments at the time of their deaths. While the cause of death was undetermined by the department, about 1/3 of the people were classified as vulnerable. In other words, they had complex needs like mental illness, drug use, or were victims of domestic violence. In November 2019, a class action was commenced by the representative applicants and the Commonwealth agreed to a settlement. The settlement was approved at a sum of $112 million. Deputy Speaker, what a huge waste of public money towards something that should never have happened. Thankfully, most debts raised using average income information have already been refunded, and anyone who made repayments to a debt raised using averaging ATO income under the program between 2015 and 2019 are eligible for a refund. Regarding the outcome, Justice Murphy of the Federal Court explained, the proceeding has exposed a shameful chapter in the administration of the Commonwealth social security system and a massive failure of public administration. And further, it should have been obvious to the senior public servants and to the responsible ministers at different points who designed and were charged with overseeing the Robodebt system that many social security recipients do not earn a stable or constant income, and any employment that they obtain may be casual, part-time, sessional or intermittent and may not continue throughout the year. The success of the class action was a significant milestone. However, we need to ensure such a debacle never happens again. We need to understand how ministers and senior public servants overlook something so significant as the unreliable income averaging based on ATO data. We do not know if public servants were inappropriately heavied and politicised. Additionally, the ongoing failure to acknowledge the mounting evidence of serious problems following its implementation. We need to clarify how much the implementation, suspension and windback of the Robodebt scheme costs taxpayers, investigate the devastating harm caused to law-abiding Australians, and investigate the use of third-party debt collectors under the scheme. Beyond the harm that Robodebt has caused to so many vulnerable Australians, we also need to consider its impact on democratic governance, government integrity and broader trust in our public institutions. Robodebt not only demonstrated a complete failure on public engagement, but also a complete disregard for its citizens. Citizens felt disempowered and under attack. This can lead to increased fear of corruption. If we do not restore public trust in our institutions, we risk losing their cooperation with the public system. Our social contract is compromised and undermined. Alarming statistics have already been revealed by Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index. Drawing on expert assessments, the data used analyses the perceptions of public sector corruption. Australia has plummeted 7 places since 2012, from 11th out of 180 countries to 18th. Additionally, a Vote Compass survey found 85% of Australians believe corruption is a problem in this country. This has a destructive impact that extends to wasted taxpayer funds, loss of goods and services, let alone eroding the trust we have in the public sector to act in our best interests. That's why it's critical that we restore integrity and confidence in our system through supporting the Royal Commission. In contrast to the previous government that refused to take responsibility, this is what we promised to Australians prior to the election. I welcome the Royal Commission commencing this morning in Brisbane, led by the Honourable Catherine Holmes, a former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Queensland, who brings vast experience from a distinguished legal career. The Royal Commission's focus will be on decisions made by those in positions of seniority. As requested, the Department of Social Services, the Attorney-General's Department, Services Australia and other relevant agencies will provide information. Anyone with relevant information will also be able to engage in the process. And like many Australians, I look forward to the final report to be delivered by the Governor-General by April 2023. And Deputy Speaker, despite the fears expressed by the previous speaker, I look forward to the restoring integrity and competence in our system of government with the establishment of a National Anti-Corruption Commission. This is a key commitment by Labor in the election campaign, and it was a key commitment from our local Labor team in the ACT community too. And that's why I welcome the announcement that the Albanese government will introduce legislation tomorrow to establish a powerful, transparent and independent National Anti-Corruption Commission. It's a critical step that demonstrates that the government is delivering on its promise to tackle corruption and restore trust and integrity to federal politics. The Albanese government's National Anti-Corruption Commission will investigate serious or systemic corrupt conduct across the entire federal public sector. And as outlined by the Attorney-General today, it will be built on the following design principles: a broad jurisdiction to investigate serious or systemic corrupt conduct across the Commonwealth public sector by ministers, parliamentarians and their staff, statutory office holders, employees of all government entities and government contractors. It will be independent. The Commission will operate independent of government with discretion to commence inquiries into serious or systemic corruption on its own initiative or in response to referrals, including from whistleblowers and the public. And there will be oversight. The Commission will be overseen by a statutory parliamentary joint committee empowered to require the Commission to provide information about its work. It will have retrospective powers. The Commission will have the power to investigate allegations of serious or systemic corruption that occurred before or after its establishment. And the Commission will have the power to hold public hearings in exceptional circumstances and when it's in the public interest to do so. And the Commission will be empowered to make findings of fact, including findings of corrupt conduct and refer findings that could constitute criminal conduct to the Australian Federal Police or the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions. And it will operate with procedural fairness with its findings subject to judicial review. Importantly, the legislation will also provide strong protections for whistleblowers and exemptions for journalists to protect the identity of sources. And following the introduction of the bill, the government will propose the establishment of a joint select committee to examine its provisions. There'll be well enough time for the Parliament to properly ensure that this is a bill that does what it says it's going to do. We look forward to support from across the Parliament for the establishment of National Anti-Corruption Commission with real power and authority, and we look forward to the outcomes of the Robodebt Royal Commission. It's essential to bring this Parliament back into the light.